Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of SciMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.
As the Rackspace debacle continues, I've been thinking more and more about backup, not only for myself, but of course for my clients. And that's always a good thing to be concerned about. So I've been looking at all my clients' backup solutions. One of the things that we've been pretty heavily reliant on is using Backblaze B2 to back up Synology servers. We use the built-in application that Synology supplies called Hyper Backup, and that works well. It's not too hard to create a bucket, and off you go, and you monitor it, and pretty soon all the client data is backed up to B2, and it's not too expensive. We've generally found it pretty affordable. I have one client who also uses the Synology surveillance station pretty heavily, and I thought to myself, hey, why don't I just turn on backups for all those surveillance videos? Well, that was a mistake because it was terabytes of data, and we started to get bills, and it was like, oops, this is just way too much money to be spending on a monthly basis, because those surveillance videos are always changing out, and the old ones are being purged and new ones are moving into place. And I think the guy's got something like 16 cameras. So that was like bad on me, right? So I thought, okay, I'll just go into Hyper Backup and I'll stop the backup and I'll try to deselect the surveillance station videos folder. You can't do that. Once you've set up the routine in the Synology and Hyper Backup, you can't deselect. So I thought, okay, no problem. I'll just log into the B2 instance of it through the Backblaze portal, which I was able to do. But interestingly, when I attempted to visualize the files, we don't see a regular file structure with Hyper Backup backups on Synology B2. In some cases, LUNs and bundles and the hierarchical folder structure. You can find a folder that actually said surveillance station videos or whatever the hell I called it, but it wasn't all the terabytes of data were in that one folder. It was just like spewed across this organizational arrangement that Hyper Backup uses to put the data onto the Backblaze B2 server. Were you aware of this?
Not really. I haven't gone in and explored it on that level. So this is new to me, although I've been thinking about this topic recently because I have a client, similar kind of scenario, not with surveillance videos, but with a Synology server that it used for file sharing, typical stuff, but they do animations and bigger files. So that all takes up a significant amount of space. But then they also have some projects where it's a work in process, a bunch of material that just gets dumped on the server temporarily. So all this stuff gets uploaded, backed up to Synology. What do they call it? C2? Synology C2?
I have not used that service at all.
And I think it's a similar scenario where it's like a one-way, and this is by design, I think, that it's meant to just be a repository and not just be easily removable, at least from the client side. It's not a immutable backup per se, but they don't want to make it too easy to remove stuff. So it's intended to be a one-way. It's only ever going to grow, essentially. And so that can be problematic in this case where they're just dumping a lot of temporary data on the server, and then that just keeps accumulating on the backup. And we're actually dealing with that even in the realm of snapshots on the same issue there. It's like you're taking snapshots regularly. I guess in your case, you could exclude the surveillance folder from those snapshots. But yeah, in most cases, you have to design all this from the beginning before you run into this kind of trouble.
Well, that's a good point, too. And the fact that you said that your client is putting their stuff temporarily, the stuff arriving, that really costs you, it's the uploading of the data and then the storage of the data. So if it's constantly changing, like my surveillance videos, that's a bad situation. Yep. So I had to delete the bucket. and pretty much start over. This was behind the scenes, and I didn't make my full disclosure was there was no full disclosure, but I didn't see any way out of it to stop the bleeding and stop the massive charges of data. I actually reached out to Backblaze via their chat, is how they provide the support for B2. And they're like, oh no, you could just mount the bucket and log it to the bucket and you should be able to deselect it. Well, they have no idea how hyper backup works, and hyper backup won't allow you to do that the way it stores the files. So,
so it's all or nothing basically for the bucket. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah. Gotcha. And the other thing I was looking at and actually logging into my bucket and creating a new bucket was, of course, you run into that situation on Backblaze B2 where you create a key ID and then an application key. Have you done this dance before?
Yep.
Okay, you need those two things. And if you don't have the application key, you have to create a new one. So that's fine. So that's just creating new login credentials or signing credentials for that bucket to continue. Most recently, I've been doing a lot of cutting and pasting on the Mac and having problems with it being consistent. And here I ran up into a brick wall and I was pulling my hair out for a while because I couldn't get the bucket to authenticate. And I was looking at what I was copying and pasting. Guess what? Key had to be typed in manually, and that was the only way I could get it to authenticate. So have you come across this where most recently, I'm running Ventura, the most recent version of Ventura, where cutting and pasting is not working as expected?
No, I haven't seen that. But my first question to you would be, are you running any kind of clipboard manager in the background?
Yes.
Okay. I would look at that first.
All right.
Yeah.
So I regularly run Alfred, which is a productivity application for Mac OS, and it does all kinds of things. And I'm a big fan of Alfred, and I've been using it for years. And it allows me to keep a historical clipboard. So that's a great thing. I didn't even think about that there might be something going on with that. It's causing my cut and paste to add extra characters or something like that. Anyway, I was confused and irritated for a long time until I realized what the problem was.
Wow. Yeah, that's one of those things you don't even think about, the integrity of the clipboard, just being able to copy something and have it being pasted exactly the way you copied it. Stuff does come up sometimes. It occurs to me like where sometimes like I've typed in, I don't know if I was connected by TeamViewer, or maybe it was like screen sharing or something, and I'm typing in the name of the Mac in the sharing preferences maybe, and I've had cases where it's not an apostrophe, it's like a single quote character, like a prime character or whatever, and it's not an apostrophe, and then it causes issues. Or I forget if by default maybe it is this straight single quote, and in another case it got converted to a single smart curly apostrophe character or whatever, and that created some problems in the encoding when clicking a link on a website somewhere for that machine or something. It has to re-encode that character. I've just seen weird things like that where text is not just text, and there's like a lot of special characters that look like a normal character, but maybe it's not the character you think it is, and who knows. That's why I would be thinking along the lines of a clipboard manager, but I would hope it would be, because it would be a much bigger problem if if there's a bug in Ventura where, copying and pasting somehow causes the text to change based on it being like re-encoded in some weird way or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely been on it hot and cold. So I can't say it's been consistently across the board problematic. But in this case, I was knee deep in the B2 buckets and just being utterly frustrated because I was trying to mount the bucket, and initially through the web GUI, it wasn't yielding the results I needed. And I just needed to reconfirm using a third-party tool if the bucket looked the same. So I was trying to do it in Mountain Duck, and I also tried it in Transmit. So both P programs that have been out there for a while. And that's how you mount the bucket, of course, is with an SFTP credential. And so then they were both failing, and I'm like, wow, what is going on?
That's just the worst when you're in the fray of dealing with the bigger issue, and then you're having like basic problems like that. Like it's just completely eroding your efficiency because you keep getting like stuck. You're just trying to log in or whatever, and
I know.
It's like hard enough as it is, and then you deal with something like that.
It's like you're a mechanic working on an engine and your ratchet tool is failing.
Yeah.
Like I'm just trying to get the spark plugs out.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's frustrating. It's funny how often these little weird character issues or re-encoding stuff comes up. I'm just looking at my notes that I made a while back. I get some stuff sometimes from the Carbon Copy Cloner release notes, and I've mentioned this on the show a few times, but I sometimes tell clients, make sure you name your files weird, and it's in my head. I have a sense of what the characters are that are problematic. There's some apps that'll let you use one of those problematic characters, and there's other apps that'll complain about it. And so you have to sometimes review this list. Let's say you're saving to a macOS server or a Synology, and you probably shouldn't use a leading space, but some people do that used to alphabetize that way, it would pop to the top of the list. Or same thing with a bullet character, which is probably fine, but maybe some apps have a problem. Or slashes are obviously the most common ones. But this was in the Carbon Copy Cloner release notes, and I get a kick out of these sometimes. I'm not sure who writes these, if it's Mike Bombick, previous guest of the show, or maybe somebody else on the team. The update in Carbon Copy Cloner was, C will no longer add the space about this folder.rtf file to the safety net folder if, quote, OneDrive appears anywhere in the folder path. This should avoid complaints from OneDrive that arise due to the 1980s-esque failure to deal with files whose names start with a space character. I love the snarky comment there. You'd think today a current product would handle a space correctly, but of all characters, that's a problem apparently for OneDrive.
I also find that creatives are the ones who get really cutesy with the file names, and those are the ones that just give me agita. What's all these garbage things that you're doing here? What is this? You just can't throw this stuff on the server and expect the server to make any sense of it. Right. My file disappeared. What did you name? Oh, you got this crazy cockamamie name on this thing.
Exactly. And I've had to have that conversation a few times with a lot of times those creatives like you're describing, because they're the ones that are collaborating on the different files on a server. In one case, the PCs can't see the file. But then I found out that if I look from the Mac, the file is there. What's going on? And it's Windows doesn't handle this space or whatever it is. I've had some cases where they repeatedly have these issues and they ask us as if it's the first time. Our files aren't showing up. What's going on? I swear to you, there's certain characters that you just really shouldn't use. I know they let you use them sometimes, but you have to try to know these are ones to avoid. A Microsoft article in the Windows client realm here in their support, and it says that it's an article about support for white space characters in file and folder names for Windows. So obviously white space is space characters, but a leading space or a trailing space after the file extension. Then they talk about having periods in the wrong place and all this stuff. If you scroll down, you can see a list of some other problematic characters and things. I've had to find these articles and send them to clients to say, look, this is really true. I know it's annoying, but you just only use regular characters.
Yeah.
That's your best
I've done
bet.
that too. One of the ways that I've explained it to them, and this is nothing revelatory, but I've said these characters are used in the machine code when they write the code that makes the computer work. So when you add them to a file name, you're confusing the heck out of the computer. Right. So anything could happen. And if you tell them data loss is possible, then they hopefully sober up and walk the straight and narrow.
Yep.
Because I'm looking at my notes to speak with you tonight here, Joe. It's just all annoyances and pet peeves. It's people and computers. And so maybe we should just venture off in that direction.
Let's dive right into the annoyances. I'll give you a win to start us off, first of all. I just wanted to mention the MacPaw Foundation. So I think you've used them even much more than I have, Jerry. MacPaw.
Clean My Mac.
Clean My Mac, exactly, and other tools for the Mac. And they actually started a foundation, a nonprofit organization, and they've been supporting the company's social projects since 2016. And of course, I think ever since the kind of full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, they've really focused their efforts on supporting the Ukrainian defenders, as they say. And they're specifically focused on non-lethal help. So that means things like communications and reconnaissance technology, tactical medicine, protective gear. I would really encourage people to not only check out the MacPaw Foundation, you can find it at macpaw.foundation, but just actually browse through this. It's really cool, the work that they're doing. And you can see some of the technology that's involved, some of the gear that's involved. They're doing this important work. They've raised over $5 million. That's amazing to see. And they also link to this company called Bathtub Creative, which I think is a really interesting glimpse into life in a war zone. It's a gauge of just how long this Russian invasion has lasted. Long enough to start a company with a mission that's tailored to how to sustainably help people and help people continue working in the midst of this ongoing invasion.
Wow.
Definitely check out MacPaw Foundation, and I think it's a really worthy cause to support. So I'd encourage you to pledge some support as well.
Yeah, they're good folks. Remarkable stuff.
I guess moving on to some peeves. Do you want to start us off, Jerry, on that?
So I had an issue, a text edit file, and it was a client credential, and it was a client who isn't on any kind of a regular program with me, but it was a very important credential. And now I'm moving everything to Hoodoo. I've been using Hoodoo now for about 6 or 7 months, and it takes a long time, but that seems to be the knowledge storage repository that everybody's been using, and I really think it's terrific. So I'm starting to move everything in there, but I needed to call up this credential, and I thought that the file was stored in the client folder that I had for them, and it was an RTF file. I'm not sure why it was saved as an RTF, and I was looking at it in after hours. So I had my computer set up to do automatic switching with light mode and dark mode, and so I was in dark mode, and I called up the file, and there was nothing there. There was no text there. And I was, of course, looking at the black representation of it, and for whatever reason, and I didn't find this out until I was really frustrated. I couldn't believe I lost this. Whatever the credential was, it was really important to me. And I said, oh, I must have fat fingered it when I had the file last open, and I might have accidentally deleted it and saved it and just closed the window. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's happened a few times to me. Yeah. So I'm in agony. And then I realized that for whatever reason, it didn't render the black text in white. So all the information was there. It was just a completely black window that was open. And I forget how I rediscovered it. I might have poked around. And when I reopened it, it still rendered the same way. So it must be something unusual with that particular file where a bit doesn't get flipped. So that was a little bit of confusion there for a while for me. But so just an annoyance, but it was probably operator error.
Yeah, on that topic, it reminds me of what we were just talking about with different character encodings and who knows what kind of hidden characters and things. And I've just been in the habit, for the longest time, of paste and match style. When I'm pasting into, let's say I'm copying something from mail, and maybe it's from the client's own email, and it's whatever formatting they used and whatever weird formatting behind the scenes, like bold in weird places or whatever, I'll just copy that. And then if I want to paste it into a note to myself, I don't want their formatting in it or something. Paste and match style. So I'm in the habit of doing, it's the longest keyboard shortcut I use on a regular basis. It's Option Shift Command V in most Mac apps. But then, of course, there's the outliers. There's Evernote, and there's, what's the other one I see regularly? I forget if it's Day One or the Things app, or there's just
Excel won't do it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Or you have to double click into a cell and then paste. But if you're in the habit of paste and match style, that doesn't work, even though that's what it does by default. So you'd hope the keyboard shortcut would just do the standard paste or whatever it wants to do. But yeah, it just doesn't work. There's no fallback. So you have to remember to Command V in there. Yeah, it's annoying. Annoying to me is how there is a standard keyboard shortcut for this, but then other apps don't use that. They just make up their own. Command Shift V, so no Option key or something.
Alternate,
So yeah, just remember the context of where you are and then press that. But yeah, I find that I do that more frequently than I just regular paste, because I typically don't want any weird formatting. And especially in this, like you're saying, dark mode versus light mode. When I'm writing an email to a client in dark mode, and sometimes I'll copy text and paste it without the paste and match style, and it will be gray text, because actually in the original email, it was gray on white. Now it's gray on black. It's dark gray on black. So it's
you definitely don't want that.
No.
Right?
And so they're going to get the email from me and think I'm messing with them, just with all the weird formatting stuff in there. But yeah, it's a weird situation with the dark mode and light mode, especially.
Yeah. The end of last year, LastPass, the password manager, had another data breach. So have you fielded any calls from concerned clients who read some sort of New York Times article? I always have those same clients call to arms, and they're forwarding me articles where people were concerned about pass managers, because inevitably, and I think this one was written by Brian Chen, who is well respected in the industry, and he's their technical guru over there at the New York Times. And he did mention in his article 1Password in passing. So, of course, my clients hone in on that. He talks about 1Password too. Have you fielded any concerned clients that have reached out to you?
No, but I'm glad you brought this up because I had this under my should I send a blast corner section here on my
Oh,
notes.
I love it.
Should I send a blast? Because we've covered this a few times recently. Just, hey, you got to update, send a blast or whatever. But yeah, of course, the subtlety there supposedly was that the LastPass breach did not affect customer data. But then I think you're saying that there was like a subsequent breach or like maybe an update to that one where in fact maybe it did affect customer data. And of course, with a password manager, we would hope that things are secure because you have a complex master password, and not to mention who knows whatever other level of security. It's not just your password that gets you in. Like you need, in the case of 1Password, you need a secret key. So hopefully they don't have the magic combination of your account login and your secret key in that case, or your master password if they have downloaded a copy of the vault or whatever.
And with LastPass, there is no secret key.
And so in their case, it's only as secure as your whatever they call it, if they have the concept of master password or just like your account password. So you may be exposed. The thing to do is to change all your passwords. It's not a trivial recommendation to tell a client to do that.
And I believe in this last breach too, information about client names and locations were included in that.
Yeah.
So they could easily see that they might have had a juicy target that they could spend time on to try to hack into.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really rough. It gives password managers a bad name in some regard. I mean, for the less savvy clients especially, because they're going to be like, this is exactly why I don't want to use this kind of thing. And
that's why I have everything on a piece of paper and an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll never be hacked, but you're also not secure because it will be hacked on an individual basis. You're not going to be able to use actually strong passwords. Chances are you're using the same password for everything. And we have that whole speech that I give clients about why that's a bad idea. That's some of the pushback that we get is what happens if this is hacked? And in my case, I'm recommending iCloud Keychain, and it's the same kind of concept there. First, you need to get into somebody's iCloud account, which is protected by two-factor authentication. Step one is really hack into the iCloud account using their iCloud password and an existing device, or maybe you can use SIM hijacking to receive a text message for them or whatever. Maybe there's a way, but that's all step one. And then the second level of security is the Mac login password or your iPhone passcode that protects that encrypted data on iCloud. But they'd have to know all of the above to get into your password manager. I explain that to people, and then their question shifts to, what if I lose everything? Then I lose all my passwords. And I explain how you get back in. If you start from scratch, you could go to the Apple Store, buy a new iPhone, and as long as you still own your phone number and you ideally have your iCloud password, you can log into iCloud and then you can get access to your keychain that way because you remember your iPhone passcode or your Mac login password or whatever. And so you can get in. If you don't have your iCloud password, you need to reset it. Then as long as you own the phone number, or you have access to the phone number, then you can reset your iCloud password, most likely, and get in that way and still, again, get access to the secure data. But then you're explaining just how complicated it is for someone to basically hack in. But yeah, it's always a subtle thing with clients.
And just a sidebar to that conversation, on the most recent John Gruber show, he had Glenn Fleischman, who has been in the Mac world for a long time, app developer. And Glenn very nicely explained in layman's terms, sometimes when you're working on a Mac and it's looking for a 6-digit authentication code to allow you access into an iCloud property, you get the 6-digit code on the same device that you're trying to log into. And we've always, at first glance, it looks like that's ludicrous. It should be, that 6-digit code should be coming to one of my other devices. And it does indeed come to your iPad or your iPhone, but it never really made sense why it actually was coming in on the same device that you were trying to log into the service. And Glenn very nicely explained that authentication of that 6-digit code is coming from a completely different, the way he described it, data path than what you're originally like trying to log into. So even though it seems like it's the same device, it is indeed the same device, but it's coming in from a disparate path, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Example I usually look to is, let's say you're on a client's computer and you just want to see what's on iCloud.com. Maybe they're already logged into iCloud on the Mac, but you want to go to iCloud.com and see, are the calendars up to date there? Because they're not updating in the calendar app. And of course, you go to log in. And if you use the username and password, it's going to pop up that same authentication step. And it's happening right there on the same Mac, but that's because you're logged into one session in the scope of the operating system.
Exactly.
And the other scope is the web. So yeah, it makes sense in that case. But in most cases, it's obviously going to be like their new iPhone that they're logging into, and then they get the alert on their Mac or whatever. Yeah, that all makes sense. But it does lead us down some, complicated conversations with clients sometimes. On the topic of the LastPass breach, the other thing I saw come up in the media recently was the NordVPN 200 most common password. There was like an article that they shared, helpfully put together this website showing the 200 most common passwords. And the criticism was clients saying, I can't believe Nord is sharing their users' passwords. So no, it's not their passwords that they're sharing. It's like just the 200 most common passwords ever across all services and things based on probably what have leaked to hacker.
Did you actually get an email with a client who was a little outraged by that?
No, I actually read some of it on Twitter, some flack on Twitter, but I'm just like, this illustrates, like, it's part of my should I send a blast corner, because again, like, it just illustrates the kind of like blowback you get sometimes, that maybe you get some billable work out of something like that, sure, but you probably get just as many people just needing a little bit of hand-holding that's free in response to something like this. Explain this to me. What does this mean? It's, oh man, I'm just trying to send you a newsletter. Just delete it. Don't worry.
Right, I can't charge you if I have to explain it to you. Just ignore it. We would be remiss, of course, if we didn't mention Bitwarden, which has now been getting a lot of too enthusiastic thumbs up from people because it's open source, and but it's not free. And I guess you can run Bitwarden on your server. I'm not sure. I haven't actually looked at that. But if you actually have Bitwarden host your data for you, it's $5 per user per month. So it can add up pretty fast. Wow. That's an enterprise solution.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all really necessary stuff. And it's certainly especially important in the enterprise. And I see why 1Password has been going after that market. It's equally important in the home realm. It's just that we have better tools to just manage it on an individual basis there, an iCloud keychain and stuff. But yeah, I hope people can just get on board with this. I'm finding more and more people are willing to go down the path of a password manager and pretty much understand like what they're doing is not secure, but it's still a lot of homework for clients to do in most cases.
Learning curve is really steep.
Yeah.
Speaking of compromises, of course, we've been talking on a couple previous shows about Rackspace. And the information is still trickling out. I have clients who still haven't had their PST folders restored, most of them. And again, I've only got 4 or 5 clients who are using Rackspace, but one has a significant number of mailboxes, I think around 20. And I think only 1 or 2 PST folders showed up. So I'm not sure what's going on. I still don't have hope that everything is going to come back for these people, but it was interesting because Rackspace claimed that during this breach, only 27 clients were potentially compromised, and they've already been notified. I questioned that a little bit. The other thing I found, which was amusing, was the founder of Rackspace was quoted in an article where he said that Rackspace is now on a trajectory of death.
Wow. That's quite a statement. I was saying in the past when we talked about it, this is one of their primary businesses, exchange hosting. That's the way I thought of Rackspace. This was one of the major things that they did. But I read some statements from them about how this was a legacy service and not in use by a lot of their clients. And yet the clients that were using exchange hosting had been with them for a long time and they really want to take care of them and this and that. But basically making the point that this is not going to affect their bottom line that much because this was not a major part of their business. Of course, this is bad publicity for them in any case. So it may affect the rest of their businesses too. But it just was helping me recalibrate, like maybe it's not such a big component of their business anymore. I mean, look at us. We've all been migrating people away from them. You migrated yourself away from them just a while back. So I guess people have been leaving, and I guess this makes sense that they don't have a current exchange offering. Maybe they were just hoping people would just slowly leave that service.
I met with a client today who I told him, just sit tight a little bit longer. Let's see if your PST folders show up. Otherwise, we're going to go into that Outlook app that we didn't reconnect to your new instance of your mail server, and we're going to try to save everything on my Mac and then delete the account and then add the new credentials and then try to upload everything. But that's painstakingly slow.
Yeah. And it's pretty involved. On the topic of frustrations, things that come up sometimes in the course of trying to just support people. Occasionally I'm looking for like how to do something in an app, and there's that helpful help menu in the menu bar. And you've got, sometimes different apps can use that help menu in different ways, but I always think of it as like, why don't I just go to help and then search? But that typically, in my experience, doesn't search the help for that app. It just searches Mac OS help broadly. So it always trips me up. Why is it like that? There is the help option for that app, usually right below it. You can just open the help thing and it opens in this really weird web browser looking thing where you can, in theory, find different tutorials and things there. And you can also search it. So you have to do that second step of opening the help for that app and then searching the help in there. But it seems like that's what the menu search should do when you go into help and you search.
Yeah, it might be a holdover from the old human interface guidelines that no one adheres to anymore, the old HIG. Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, maybe. The nice thing about that search is that it does search for menu items. So that part is really helpful. If you're looking for a word count or something and you just search for the word, if word count appears in the menu system of that app, it'll highlight that menu for you. So that's helpful. But in many cases, it's not showing me the type of help that I want. It's just showing system-wide help. So just a little frustration. And I wish more apps would get on board with like actually showing their like results for help in that app in the help menu.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And they probably just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
You got to pay somebody to do that.
All right. Well, here's another one. Couldn't we have an easy way to eject drives? You're trying to tell a client if they have a laptop, they have a time machine backup. What am I supposed to eject this first? What does that mean? Okay, you have to go to the Finder. So you've already lost them because if they're not already familiar with this, right. They go to the Finder. They're not going to remember the first step.
You lost me with the go to the Finder.
Go where now? Who says what? And and then look for the icon. And then if you see, click the eject symbol. But maybe you're not going to see an eject symbol. You might see a little spinning thing. Click that and then click the eject. And that's just too complicated. Wouldn't it just be nice if this was a built-in option to have an eject menu in the menu bar? And I'm sure you're going to tell me there's 10 different apps that you can install that have this option or whatever. But there is an eject menu that used to appear back in the day when you could eject a CD from the Mac, which some clients are still complaining they went off CD drives and DVD drives and Macs. But anyway, that's the only thing you can eject from them. You can go into, I forget what folder it is behind the scenes. What do they call these little menus in the top right? I forget. Menu extras, maybe? Yeah, menu extras. So you can get the little eject menu and just open it.
See the way I helped you out there?
Yeah, nice. And like you can add that menu to your menu bar. It's great, but it does nothing unless you have a CD or DVD inserted into a super drive that's connected to your Mac. It would be nice if they would just bring that menu back and show it whenever there's a hard drive connected to your Mac, and then you can just go there. The clients could remember that and go to the eject menu and select.
Now, what about all the people, Joe, that are listening to you right now and they're saying, what about dragging it to the trash and or right-clicking on it, bringing up the contextual menu to eject?
Yeah, sure. You could do either of those options. But again, clients, I don't know if they're going to remember, find it. First of all, you have to locate the icon on your desktop or in the computer window on your Mac that shows all the devices, and then drag it from there to the trash. They're not going to find it there because in most cases it may not show on the desktop, or it's probably covered by 100 different windows or other icons or whatever. Going to right click on it somewhere, same thing. They may not have right click enabled and they're going to forget anyway what that step was. I think it needs to be a top level menu in the menu bar. Just click on the eject menu and select the name of the drive. Wouldn't that be great? And I don't think it would be that complicated for Apple to bring that back, that menu option that could show only if drives are connected. But I'm surprised it hasn't come up more. I think probably most people are just like yanking the cord out and not thinking twice about it.
And for the most part, my suggestion of dragging it to the trash, generally that's bad advice for any client to drag anything to the trash because you just deleted half your computer. How did that happen? You told me to drag it to the trash to eject it. I wanted to eject it.
I wanted to eject my documents folder, so I dragged it to the trash.
Exactly.
Whoops.
Yeah. That's always a bad mistake.
Yeah.
All right. So I got one for you. So I'm on Ventura, and I don't know if it's changed since Monterey, but there's so many, and I'm not one of those people normally that complains about, things are really tiny on the computer. You know how you get those people that are always complaining about it. I deal with everything at normal size, and I try to get glasses to adjust. So one of the things that I find is just like absolutely ludicrous is when I'm in messages, I really can appreciate pinning conversations to people not so much conversations, but ongoing conversations. So I pin conversations to you and Sam, and it's up there. And I've recently started to do this, but these things look like gigantic balloons in my messages field on the left-hand side. Like, what the hell is that? Like, there's no way to make them smaller. Right. They're gigantic. I don't understand. This looks like an unfinished app.
I completely agree with you. Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, I know. And it's a feature. It's like you can pin conversations for easy access. Except here's the other problem with it. Not only do they take up more space than is warranted, but you actually now don't see the most recent message as a preview like you do if it's not pinned. Like I can see the preview text of the non-pinned messages, even if it's already been read and responded to or whatever. Whereas with the pinned ones, you only see a message like preview if something new has come in that you haven't read on another device or whatever. I think it's a more truncated preview because there's less space, even though the icon takes up so much space. So it's just like overall a worse experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got 7 conversations pinned, and it takes up a third of my screen real estate on the left-hand side of my screen. What the heck?
Yeah, I feel like saying to Apple, don't be so clever, just put it at the top of the list. Like the same way that the Notes app, you can pin a note and it looks the same, but it's at the top of the list. Like that's all we really would want from messages conversations. I don't think this use of space is more efficient or better that they change the icons. I just think it's arbitrary. And I agree with you. It looks unfinished. It's just a weird experience.
Or if you insist on doing it this way, let me adjust the balloon size.
Yeah, maybe somebody's going to write in and say, there's a secret way to do this or something, like an accessibility feature. Don't use weird balloons in messages or something like that. But yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because it's a frustration I share as well.
So I got a couple client stories for you. They're brief, but first, an anonymous client story. We've joked about this before, but I have a pretty successful website directing people to a product called Daylight, and Daylight is a CRM system for the Mac, and they've been around for years, and they've moved to the cloud about 6 or 7 years ago, and they're still developing, and it's a tough little company. They're not blowing up where they've got lots of users, but they've got a dedicated installed base. So very often I'll get a message from thinking that I'm Market Circle, the developer of Daylight, because the website's daylightmac.com. That's my URL. I just started putting a plug there.
Good plug.
And I've got this little text expander snippet. Thank you for contacting us. You really need to contact Market Circle. Here's where you go. We're a Apple consultancy that's in the New England area, and we mostly deal with people in Connecticut. But if you'd like to find somebody who's clever with Daylight in your area, here's the link. So it's an informative response. It's not like I'm saying, we don't make Daylight, don't bother us. It gives them 3 separate places where they could find out more information. So I have an attorney, and I know it's an attorney because the guy put out his name there, and he had some problem where he installed it and it's not working for him, or his mail keeps on crashing, and he wants to know how to fix it. And so I sent him our authoritative letter. Now, if I knew there was some sort of bug, I would have said, hey, there's a bug. This doesn't happen to me, and it's nothing widespread. It's like, how am I supposed to know what's going on in your Mac from this email?
Yeah, you have no easy answer for the guy.
Yeah,
sure.
But there is an entree in my response where if he wanted to engage us, we would engage with him for our normal consulting fee.
Sure.
I send him off his email, and within 2 minutes later, I get a 2-word reply. He wrote, not helpful.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I let it go, but it's so typical of so many attorneys that I come in contact with. This is the cut of their jib. Yeah. This is just the way these people are wired. Like, how dare you do that?
Yeah, not helpful. I don't owe you anything, mister. Yeah, and it was trying to be helpful. It's just, it's so annoying.
Yeah, and on the heels of that, it just came to mind. I had a 16-minute conversation, because when they go long, I start to time them, where somebody was looking to try to recover data from an old Mac. And I seem to be getting a lot of calls from that recently. And I said, well, look, you could schedule with us, send us the serial number of the Mac, and we could probably take it apart for you. And we could even do this on site. We'll hook it up with technician cables and see if your data mounts. And so we're just going around. And I said, you could send me that information. If you need to go to Drive Savers, send me an email. I'll send you a discount link. And then you give them your email address, even though they found you from a web page and they're like, hold on, I got to get a pencil. So you wait for them to get a pencil and then you give them your email address and you're speaking very clearly. And we're 16 minutes into it. And I'm like, okay, well, I wish you the best. We're happy to work with you if you want. Got to move on here. And just from the tone of their voice, the apple has turned, right? Oh, okay. And of course, the person never writes it. You've lost it, but who cares? But at the same time, it's like this thing, what am I doing? I'm just like sitting around by the phone to handle your problems for you for free?
I think people have this concept of calling for support. It's oftentimes you're calling some big company and they staff up with support people, usually too few to actually help the incoming calls. A lot of times it's like, we're experiencing a high call volume or whatever, and it's going to be 30 minutes. They're used to that. They're used to like waiting in a queue, and they're used to talking to somebody for as long as they want, because that person typically doesn't force them off the phone. They're just sitting in a call center. They don't really care if they're talking to this person and it's just going on forever, or they're getting to the next person oftentimes. And so, in other words, those big companies are just paying for that free support. I'm thinking of Verizon or Apple, and they think of you that way when they call you coming in off the street, so to speak, as opposed to having that relationship with you where they understand how you work and they respect your time. But that's clearly not a good fit when they're thinking of you in that way, not just as a small company that provides paid support at a higher quality. They're thinking of you as this generic big name company and you're at their service, even though you have no relationship with them. It's a misfit. Whereas it's like the kind of call where they say, hey, I really appreciate the time you spent. I respect your time, that kind of thing. That's the opposite kind of experience where they get that you're going out of your way. Typically, you would be charging. They're getting free support. So they want to respect that time and they say so. And that's usually a green flag or whatever, like a good sign. But
or you're happy to just give them some free goodwill and they say, look, what do I owe you for this call?
Right.
They offer to pay. And most times we say, no, just keep us in mind next time.
Yeah, or you've mentioned in the past, sometimes you'll ask them to write a review. Hey, I got some great help or whatever. You hope that they don't mention that it was free in the review, but it's something that they can do as a mutual like goodwill kind of thing, which is nice. I do that. I've been trying to do that more frequently recently when I've visited businesses with really good service. I bought some, they call it like raw denim jeans from a store locally, and I had a really good experience. It was really efficient, got them hemmed in the same day, and I got to pack for my wedding that I went to, not my wedding, pack for a wedding I went to a few weeks ago, those very jeans that I had just bought, not in Spain, but and I was like really happy that they like went out of their way. They could have said, oh, normal turnaround is 24 to 48 hours, whatever. They could have held that line, but they did me a favor. And I wrote them a review to just say thanks for that. And I think that's, even though I paid full price and everything, I still just voluntarily wrote a review because it helped me find them. And I hope that they stay in business. So it's that little extra goodwill. But I think when clients are either getting free support or just are really appreciative, that's a great opportunity to ask them for a little bit of goodwill if they want to write a review. I think that does help with like search ranking and just clients that are kicking the tires and checking you out in the Apple Consultants locator or whatever. They may be looking to see how recently those reviews were posted and whether people had good things to say about you or how they described you, just so that they know what to expect. And yeah, it's a nice thing to have.
Of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. My Mac is slow.